in their minds, they know exactly where their houses in the Gaza Strip are going to be. There is a political gain at keeping Israelis at that moment of trauma. They are much easier to manipulate. The violence against Palestinians in the West Bank reached unbelievable levels. What Israel is doing today is outside the norms of humanity.
Israeli human rights groups B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights in Israel accused Israel's government of committing genocide in Gaza. As evidence, the groups listed Israel's direct attacks, destruction of the living conditions and the social fabric in Gaza, and forced displacement in a powerful 88-page report. Here to explain that report to me and the process behind that decision is Israeli journalist and chair of B'Tselem's executive board, Orly Noy. Orly, welcome to Middle East Eye, and thank you so much for making the time to speak to us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Tamar.
Could you just explain why you chose to classify what Israel is doing in Gaza, not just as war crimes or atrocities, but genocide?
B'Tselem's report, which is called Our Genocide, is divided into two parts. In the first part, we document how the physical annihilation, how the physical genocide looks like in Gaza. The second part deals with the conditions that allow genocide to happen. From the very first day of this war of annihilation, B'Tselem started documenting and reporting the crimes that Israel was conducting in Gaza Strip against the civilian population. And we kept reporting about, war crimes and crimes against humanity, etc. But at some point, those crimes, along with the very explicit intent, which is a very crucial component of genocide, the intent that accompanies the crimes, accumulated to something that could not be ignored anymore, and that sent us into a long and thorough investigation and research, at the end of which we concluded that Israel is indeed committing the crime of genocide in Gaza. This is a very calculated policy that Israel officials, both politicians and army high-rank officers, declared time and time about the intent to annihilate Gaza, to destroy it to dust, to evict it from all its population. The repeated declaration about no innocent people, starting from the Israeli president down to soldiers on the ground. So it wasn't a whim. It was a well-calculated policy that has been executed by the Israeli army since October 7th. So the definition of genocide is the deliberate attempt to annihilate an entire or a part of a certain group. It does not require the annihilation, the physical annihilation of every individual in that group. What it does require is action and intent to make the group not possible to continue its existence as such. So everything that is the envelope of the physical annihilation of individuals in Gaza, which is the destroying of the infrastructure necessary for the continuing of living in Gaza, is part of that crime of genocide, because this altogether is accumulating into the annihilation of a group and making it impossible to continue to exist. Look, Israel systematically crushed down the entire infrastructure that could have dealt with the distribution of the humanitarian aid. First, by dismantling UNRWA, which was the only power that was, built to do that job. And then, of course, targeting the entire Hamas civilians infrastructure, which was the other power that could have dealt. Then we know that Israel is actually empowering the anarchist elements in Gaza, like the chaotic groups of Abu Shabab. So there is no other way to see it but a clear intent to stir chaos, not allowing anyone, including not the Palestinian Authority, not UNRWA, not the civilian branch of Hamas, nobody to take control to handle that situation. Hundreds of thousands of people are being starved, and then to create those traps, death traps, where they are tempted into with the promise of food and then being bombed to death. It's without a doubt part of this system.
Gaza is seen as a hostile environment. There are enemies embedded everywhere. Do you think that view of Gaza has contributed to the way that Israel's military has gone about this and contributed to, Israeli society's reactions to or support for such a campaign?
There are always preconditions that enable a genocide to take place. Among those are the deep sense of victimhood among the perpetrators. Decades upon decades of promoting racist ideology and ideology of Jewish supremacy and promoting the deep dehumanization of Palestinians in general and the residents of Gaza in particular. Those are all parts of the preconditions that enable a genocide to take place. And there are so many historic examples and precedents to show that genocides do not just happen overnight. They always come after a trigger, and October 7th was a horrifying trigger. And they are always accompanied by a deep sense of victimhood among the perpetrators and a public opinion that is ready to cooperate and to collaborate with that horrible crime. Among that, the Israeli media should be held accountable for its role in preparing the public opinion or to shape the public opinion in Israel in such a way that would enable that genocide to take place. The Israeli public has been manipulated for 22 months to remain in that moment of trauma and not to start dealing with it, because there is a political gain at keeping Israelis at that moment of trauma. They are much easier to manipulate. They are much easier to manipulate into supporting the ongoing annihilation, war of annihilation.
This isn't new in the sense that there has been an increasing rightward shift under Netanyahu's latest government, very far right cabinet. I was wondering if you noticed that change and how that's affected your work.
The government is very explicit about its intent to limit, if not annihilate entirely, our ability, the human rights organizations' ability to work. We have all been targeted. They are going after our funds. They are going after our volunteers. They are going after our researchers. We are still waiting to see, the backlash of these two reports by B'Tselem and by Physicians for Human Rights.
You think there will be consequences from the Israeli government?
I think it's fair to assume that it won't go without some sort of reaction. It's a well-calculated risk to even say Israel is committing genocide, but there are things that we cannot say. If we are asked, what do we think, for example, that needs to be done in order to stop that genocide? So we are very limited in the way that we can answer that question. We don't want to give them reasons to come and shut us down. So we limit ourselves into saying that, the international community should do everything within its powers, within what is permitted by the international law to stop those atrocities, to stop that crime from continuing. But we cannot be more explicit than that because we are under severe restrictions today. I think back about our apartheid report. Could we not have declared the Israeli regime to be an apartheid regime a decade earlier? Of course we could have. 2 decades earlier, of course we could have. It's not that it became genocide the moment B'Tselem declared it to be genocide. Of course we could have published it months earlier, no doubt about that.
You haven't just documented these atrocities and actions in Gaza. You've done a lot of really detailed work in the occupied West Bank. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a bit about those acts and how they've affected Palestinians elsewhere.
The entire Israeli reaction towards Palestinians everywhere between the river and the sea changed dramatically, fundamentally since October 7th. In Gaza, it became a place of annihilation. But at the same time, and under the pretense of this annihilation growing Gaza, the violence against Palestinians in the West Bank reached unbelievable levels. Dozens of Palestinian communities fled because of brutal settler violence, backed by the Israeli army, of course. In the very same day that we published the genocide report, a dear friend of our circles of activists in the West Bank, Aude Hadalin, was murdered. His murder is well documented from many different angles. And the murderer was released to his house, and the entire, more or less, community of El Khair, where he came from, was arrested. And this is something that we also refer to in the genocide report itself. If this genocide is not stopped, the smallest trigger can expand it to the territories of the West Bank against the Palestinian population, because the infrastructure is there, the dehumanization is there, the culture of mass violence against Palestinians is there. So it can expand, the genocide can expand to the West Bank, and we see clues to that happening. Oh, there was just it was unbelievable. We all knew him, and we all, he was a colleague and he was a comrade and it shook us to the core. But it's not just that one person, it's entire communities under threat.
And what is the end goal of that chaos, of that anarchy? How does it serve its interest to create that disorder?
I honestly don't know if the Israeli government itself has defined the end game. Some parts of the Israeli politics, for sure, have, and they are saying it very, very clearly. We saw the messianic, Kahanist, fascist sections of the Israeli politics celebrating those days of death and destruction as a miracle, celebrating October 7th even as days of miracle, because it allowed them to go ahead with their plans to ethnically cleanse the entire Gaza Strip and fully take over, bring back the military direct occupation, and to rebuild the settlements. There was only a few days ago sort of a march of return to Gaza by, extreme right-wingers. And those people, in their minds, they know exactly where their houses in Gaza Strip are going to be. So the plan is there. If the international community does not wake up, and I do not believe that I have, that even as a Jewish person, I cannot believe that the world is standing still once again, allowing those atrocities to take place. And if the world doesn't wake up, I think that there is a real chance that the most horrifying plans that those messianic, Kahanist, racist people have in mind will be fulfilled if Israel is allowed to just continue as it does. What we demand is for the world to look at what's happening with open eyes, to recognize it by its truthful name, and then to do everything within its power to stop it. One of the means through which Israel is silencing always criticism is by labeling any criticism of its crimes as antisemitism. And as a Jewish person, it's very important for me to say this. The meaning of anti-Semitism is excluding Jews as a collective from the norms of humanity. What Israel is doing today is outside the norms of humanity. Allowing it to do so, this is the true meaning of anti-Semitism, because what it means is saying to Israel, you as a Jewish collective are allowed to operate outside humanity. This is true anti-Semitism. And I think that if anti-Semitism is something that worries the world, then the first action to take is stop the Israeli crimes.
Orly Noy, board of Israeli human rights group B'Tselem. Thank you so much for speaking to Middle East Eye today and sharing the details of your report. If you are looking to read the report or a summary, you can find it on B'Tselem's website, and there you can find the details of what they've documented over the past 22 months. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.